And it's not just rock stars, like a lot of women and people in general, but it tends to happen to women, I think, more often. Hopefully that's changing. But it's not uncommon for a woman to sort of lose her identity, whether it's because she becomes a mother or because she hooks up with someone who's just got this really big life. And so that's a major part of my story. But this thing about my work as a stripper and my trajectory before I even met Joe, because I was for a brief period a meth addict. I think that's a really important part of my story, because I think there's this thing about there's a stigma around addiction for sure. There's also a stigma around sexuality or sexual women in general. And I'm certainly not going to say that stripping is the healthiest thing for all women. And for a time, when I did it later, it wasn't all that healthy for me. When I did it right around the time right before I got sober, I was stripping, and it wasn't all that healthy for me because I didn't have great boundaries. But when I first started, it saved my ass. I had just come through a short meth addiction as a 17, 18-year-old. I just got into Austin. I was going to UT. I had terrible self-esteem issues. I didn't believe I wanted to be a writer. I didn't think I would ever be good enough. That was sort of my daily mantra is I'm never going to be good enough for anything. And so I dropped out. I mean, I started using speed and shooting up right away. And I was in the punk scene, and I got caught up with, there's a bunch of great people in the punk scene, really fun, smart punks who were making music and going to school. And then there was this contingent that was shooting up speed and beating each other up. And of course, my self-image kind of identified more with that contingent. And so within 6 or 8 months, I'd spiraled seriously, lost everything, spent all my scholarships and grants on drugs, been ripped off, beaten up. I'd been abducted, threatened with death. I mean, it was a real mess. But because I spiraled so quickly, I sort of woke up one day really quickly and got out of it and tried to find a job so I could go back to school and start paying off those loans. And couldn't find a job anywhere and needed rent. And a friend told me about this strip club. And I was a sexual person who was raised in a very sort of strict Catholic household with the schools and everything. And so I was pretty inhibited, but I'd never been in a place where people were celebrating sexuality and sort of seeing it as a form of self-expression. And while, commercializing sexuality in general might not be the healthiest thing for someone, especially at my tender age of 18, it was a positive experience in that it helped me get back on my feet. I was instantly making money. I was being appreciated. There were bouncers. There was no touching back then. I was being told on a daily basis that I was, you did a lot of talking with your clients back then. So I felt like, people were telling me I was interesting and funny. So it was actually a real self-esteem booster. And it was also great to be in this environment where people just were not demonizing or condemning sexuality or a sexual woman. So I think that's an important part of my story. I work in the field of sex therapy now. And there's a bit of a correlation or a parallel, I think, with sexuality and intimacy and addiction, because a lot of that is about connection or lack of connection. If you have intimacy issues, it might be because you're unable to connect for whatever reason. And if you're unable to connect and you have a predisposition for alcoholism, that emotional isolation can lead you down that path. And so there's a lot of parallels, I think, between those two worlds.